My name's Shay. I'm the lead IQA on digital marketing as part of the Pearson team. I've got a couple of objectives really for today. First and foremost, I want to take you through some guidance and talk you through what we think is the best way to approach developing a summative portfolio for your apprentices. And then also to go through how you can use our mapping and tracking document to aid you in developing the summative portfolio, as well as that working as a great tool for you to decide with the apprentice what are the best pieces of evidence and to cross-check it to make sure you're in the right place. So goals for today. First, I'm going to take you through the presentation. There's plenty of time at the end for question and answer. There is no such thing as a silly question. So please feel free to really satisfy yourself that you know everything you need to know by the time we've finished. If there is anything else after that you think of, you can always send the EPA delivery team a note and we can follow up with you. So goals for today, talking about summative development, giving you some help and advice, time for you to ask questions, and I'll kick off now. Okay, so I've introduced myself already. First thing I'd like to cover is how to select evidence. So during the last 6 months, we really want you to sit down with the apprentice and start to develop best examples of work-based evidence from all of the time that the apprentice has been involved in their digital marketing standard apprenticeship. The reason that we're suggesting this is during the later stages of the apprenticeship, the apprentice will be able to showcase the best examples, the best work-based examples through a summative portfolio development. And what we want the summative portfolio to be is a personalized piece of evidence that really does highlight the best work-based examples of their digital skills, their knowledge and behaviours. The reason why we think this is a really solid base for us to look at evidence is if we compare this to case studies may have been carried out earlier on in the apprenticeship when the apprentice's knowledge was not as detailed as it is towards the end of their apprenticeship, and they may not be using certain tools or platforms or functionality in digital that they will be using towards the end of their apprenticeship. So we want to see their best work, and the summative portfolio is really the end goal for us to get a good summary of where they are from a skills, knowledge and behaviours point of view. What should we put in the portfolio? Okay, so the summative portfolio development, it's a key document, and what we want the apprentice to try to focus on is maybe it's good practice for the apprentice to develop a draft so that they can think about how they maybe change evidence when they qualify what they're putting against evidence. A good opportunity for the apprentice to give us some insight into their world as a digital marketing apprentice is for them to develop an introductory page as background. One of the reasons why this is useful, I'll come on to later, but in essence, if the assessor can understand the setting where the apprentice is working, understand a little bit about the industry, then that will give us some guidance in terms of what are the norms for how businesses in that sector work with their customers, maybe their consumer businesses, maybe their service-based businesses, and they'll all have a slightly different way of working, and we want to really be in tune with that. So to help our team, we would really like to know a little bit about the apprentice, a little bit about the company, and a little bit about their role. So I would suggest half to one page at the start of the portfolio is a good place to start. Obviously, the portfolio can be amended and updated before final submission. The key here is we want you to collate brilliant examples of work that meets the what standard criteria. And again, I'll come back and cover that in a little bit later. But first of all, we really want you to question and consider where the evidence meets all the criteria that we're looking for, so that you can select the best evidence versus the best criteria best criteria, and that your examples are the best that you can lay hand to, and you're confident that that's the best example for that learner. So as I mentioned earlier, the introductory paragraph is great, and if the guidance says, look, that's half a page to a whole page, that's fine. They can talk about when they started their apprenticeship, who they work with, their role, and give us a little bit of a heads up in terms of how they go about their day-to-day work in their company setting. What not to do. Some simple lines here. Try not to create a summative document that's hard to read. And in that, what I'm suggesting is make sure that simple things like the font is legible, it's clear, that an assessor is going to be able to read it, that you haven't tried to cram too much copy on one page, or they're not laying screenshots over the top of copy, that they're not using copy that is the wrong color against a text background. So really, it needs to be legible. They need to be able to read it. It needs to be clear. We need to be able to read it. One thing to avoid is not putting any links into the portfolio, because all the assessor is going to do is to assess the evidence in the portfolio that's presented. So they won't be looking at any links. So best evidence needs to be in the summative, and we won't be looking to click through to see any other evidence. If there is any other evidence, then the best thing to do is take a screenshot and pop that in the summative portfolio so it's linked to the criteria. Ideally, we'd like you not to use case studies if you've got a good selection of work-based examples of the apprentice's actions as a digital marketing apprentice. We want you to provide as much detail as possible. We're keen to understand, and we're keen for you to explain how the work was completed, with whom and why. And obviously, as you all know already, it would be useful if the apprentice talks about the work that they do, that they complete, how they have managed things. So in their sense, it's I do this as opposed to we do that, or our business always uses this. We're really keen to see what they've taken ownership for. If there are things like outcomes, results, or examples from reports, if they've been used, they're great to put in too. We don't need to see a whole report. We can see a summary page of a report, or some metrics or analytics. They're all great as well to help us substantiate what level the apprentice has been working at, how they've approached tasks, and how they've achieved against a plan or a goal. Tips and things to consider. If you're using social media, explain how you use it and why it helps your role in the business. If you use email marketing, explain with whom and who you want to reach. If you create content for digital marketing, explain the tools, be exact, talk about how you've worked with them, the platforms, the functions, the usability, why they've been selected. Explain how these suit your objectives. The assessor will be able to understand all of this, so feel free to put in as much detail as possible. Another example would be if the apprentice is using things like scheduling tools, explain why they're being used, what functions help you. There are lots of layers to a lot of the tools that the apprentices will use. So give us detail on exactly the specifics of what you're using and why, what you're hoping to achieve by using it, and why it's a good fit for what you're trying to analyze. If the apprentice managed projects, detail exactly how they've gone about managing them, tools they've used, platforms, analysis, any support from the team, or any sign-offs that they need to get, or anything they've done independently. So these are all good areas to consider and use as a reference point. In terms of what the summative portfolio should look like, again, some simple guidelines. The layout and presentation of the evidence is really important. So I've mentioned a couple of times the apprentice should look to use work-based examples to use against individual criteria. So an example here, for one piece of criteria, the first piece on our standard, the apprentice has to demonstrate communicating across 3 different platforms, 3 types of audiences or customer segments, and one of these has to be a form of communication. So what you could consider is considering the criteria above, then look at 1 or multiple slides or pages to show how this criteria has been met. And that might include something like a copy of a message that was sent direct through social media, an internal email to a line manager or a colleague, or even a screenshot of a message in a company group chat or a customer email campaign. The apprentice can screenshot or attach a copy and paste their work examples into a PDF, into a Word document, or even use a PowerPoint, whatever they're more comfortable in using. And then we'd just like them to save that with their name and then summative portfolio. What should a portfolio look like? I've mentioned an introductory paragraph is useful, and I've given you some guidance on how long that should be. We want you to select and choose evidence that supports all of the what criteria. So from A1.1 to A1.13. I'd like you to consider rereading exactly what the criteria asks you to cover so that we can see the knowledge, skills, behaviours that the apprentice has used when they've carried out that work as a digital marketing apprentice with the employer. Work-based examples are king here. So areas that are good: validating internal communication, customer communication, planning, report development, CRM tools if they're used, scheduling tools, analysis, software, content, strategy development, social media, email, web content updates or design, how they've executed tasks, or anything that they've done which relates to the criteria and backs up their knowledge and their application as a digital marketing apprentice. So I'm now going to move on to the digital marketing mapping and tracking document. This document is now available on ACE 360 for you to download, and I suggest post today, download a copy, take a look, and you'll be able to see how this is formatted for you to collate the summative portfolio and reference evidence. Again, to back up what I've said, we want the mapping and tracking document to be clear. We want you to collate and refine the best work-based examples of evidence to use against the what criteria. We want you to detail where evidence is met. So in simple terms, an example would be summative portfolio page 2, employer reference page 1. We want you to submit the mapping and tracking document with the summative portfolio gateway. Unfortunately, if you don't submit a mapping and tracking document going forward to support the apprentice evidence, you won't pass gateway requirements. So you'll be advised to submit your completed mapping and tracking document before your apprentice can progress to EPA. How does the assessor use the mapping and tracking document? The assessor only needs to track the what criteria A1.1, A1.13. The assessor assesses all the evidence and identifies where the criteria has been met and where the competencies have been met. The assessor will look for evidence of a deeper level of understanding, knowledge, skills and behaviour from the apprentice's actions to grade the how and with the whom criteria. And then higher competency grading across all components is graded holistically. So it's important we get an outline of how tasks have been completed or learned and applied and how skills have been applied across every component. And so next steps. Select and create a summative portfolio for the what criteria, A1.1 to A1.13 inclusive. So to reiterate again, summative portfolio is just against the what criteria, the how and the with whom. You can use all evidence to map your learner's evidence in your mapping and tracking document. The portfolio should be saved as a PDF, Word or PowerPoint document with your name on it. Download the mapping and tracking document from ACE, complete the mapping and tracking document, upload your apprentice's summative portfolio and the document into the candidate area in ACE 360. Your allocated assessor will check and confirm all evidence is complete and confirm that your learner is ready to undertake the synoptic project. Okay, that's the presentation finished. Hopefully there are 1 or 2 questions that I can cover off now. If there are no questions in the next foreseeable future, you can drop a line to the EPA delivery team at Pearson with anything that you'd like to be clarified, and we'll pick things up from there.